All right, listen up, because some big changes are on the way for pay packets all across the UK. Starting in April 2026, the minimum wage is getting a pretty serious bump. So right now we're going to break down exactly what's happening, who it's going to affect, and most importantly, what it really means for your wallet.
Okay, let's just jump right in with the big question on everyone's mind. Could you actually be earning up to £1,500 more this year? Well, for a lot of people, the answer is a big yes. The government thinks about 2.7 million of the lowest paid workers in Britain are about to get a pay rise. But, as always, it's a little more complicated than that.
You see, this whole thing creates a real tension. On one side, it's a fantastic boost for millions of workers. But on the other side, well, a lot of businesses are worried it's a financial burden they'll struggle to handle, and that can end up affecting prices for all of us. Let's dig into both sides of this coin.
Okay, first things first, let's talk about the pay rise itself. And just to be clear, this isn't some tiny little adjustment we're talking about. This is a major policy change that's going to impact a huge number of people.
So just how many people are we talking about? A whopping 2.7 million. That's the number of workers who are expected to get a direct benefit from this. Think about people working in shops, in pubs, in restaurants, in the care sector. The list just goes on and on.
So go ahead and circle this date on your calendar, April 1st, 2026. From that day forward, it's the law. Every employer in the country will have to pay their staff at least these new minimum rates.
All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the numbers. What are the new hourly rates actually going to look like?
Okay, first, just a quick bit of housekeeping here. The top rate has a special name, the National Living Wage. Simply put, it's the legal minimum hourly pay for any worker in the UK who's 21 or older.
So here they are, the new numbers. For anyone 21 and over, the rate is climbing to £12.71 an hour. But hey, look at the jump for 18 to 20-year-olds. Their rate is shooting up by a massive 8.5% to £10.85 an hour. And for younger workers, those aged 16 to 17 and apprentices, their minimum rate is going up to £8.
So, okay, that's the hourly rate. But what does that actually look like over a whole year? Well, for a full-time worker who's 21 or over and on that national living wage, the government estimates this all adds up to an extra £900 in your pocket before tax.
And remember those 18 to 20-year-olds we talked about? For a full-time worker in that group, that bigger percentage increase means an even bigger annual boost. We're talking around £1,500 more per year before tax. That is a huge step up.
So you might be wondering, why now? What's the thinking behind this pay bump? Let's take a look at the reasons.
This quote from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, really gets right to the heart of it. The number one reason is the cost of living crisis, which is still hitting everyone hard. The government's goal, they say, is to make sure that people on low incomes are getting properly rewarded for their hard work.
But if you dig a little deeper, there's more to it. Yes, it's about tackling the cost of living, but it's also part of a bigger plan to shrink the pay gap between different age groups, and maybe, eventually, move towards having just one single minimum wage rate for all adults.
Now, it's really important to get this. These numbers don't just get plucked out of thin air. The government gets recommendations from a group called the Low Pay Commission. They're an independent body, and their whole job is to study the economy and figure out what the minimum wage rates should be each year.
Okay, time to switch gears. We've heard the good news for workers, but let's look at this from the other side of the counter. How are businesses and employers feeling about all of this? This quote from Kate Nichols, who represents the hospitality industry, really sums up the main worry. She's saying that businesses, especially places like pubs and restaurants, have pretty much reached their breaking point when it comes to absorbing costs. They feel they have no choice but to pass these new wage costs on to us, the consumers, which could end up pushing prices higher. So here's the potential chain reaction that has businesses on edge. First, their costs go up, not just from wages, but also from things like national insurance contributions. Then they have to make a tough choice. Either take a hit on their profits or, you guessed it, pass those costs on to customers. And that could mean we all end up paying more for our coffee, our meals out, and so on. And you're hearing the alarm bells ringing loudest in a few specific areas. Industries like hospitality, retail, and the care sector are particularly worried. These are all businesses that tend to have a lot of staff on minimum wage and often operate on really tight profit margins, so any increase in costs hits them especially hard.
Okay, so we've heard from the government, we've heard from businesses, but let's bring it all back to the most important question. What does all of this actually mean for you and your budget? And really, it all comes down to this one big trade-off.
On the one hand, if you're a minimum wage earner, you're getting more money in your pocket, which is fantastic. But on the other hand, there's this risk that you'll just end up paying more at the shops. It's the central dilemma here.
Let's make it real for a second. That yearly pay rise works out to about an extra 75 to 125 pounds a month. Now, that's not buy a new car money, but it could absolutely be the difference when you're doing the weekly shop, paying for the bus, or trying to cover those ever-rising utility bills. It's some much-needed breathing room.
Which, of course, brings us to the final crucial question. This pay rise will definitely help millions of people, but will it be enough to actually get ahead of the rising cost of living, or even just to keep up? That's the big unknown, and it's a debate that's definitely going to continue long after these new rates kick in.